Now, what is going on with everybody? It is your boy, Eric, aka Young God, coming to you live in the Green Dungeon today, giving it to you real raw rugged. And I have a very special guest on the other line. I will let her introduce herself. Who do we have here today?
I'm Mary Frances Winters. I'm president, and I am not the president anymore. I'm chief executive officer of the Winters Group, a global diversity, equity, inclusion consulting firm.
Well, I appreciate you coming here today. When I have guests like you on, I feel like I'm smarter. So I appreciate you for making my platform seem much smarter than it really is. So thank you for coming on.
Well, Simon,
Um,
I appreciate the invitation. Absolutely.
of course. How's your day going?
My day is going great. I'm in Barbados. I live here part time, and when I'm not here in Barbados, I live in Charlotte. But it's summer, 365 days of the year here in Barbados. So went for my swim this morning and doing well.
Before we get anything, I would like to talk about Barbados really quickly because I haven't been out the country yet. I've been throughout our country, America, but I haven't been outside the country yet. I do
Okay.
plan to do so soon.
hmm
So in Barbados, how is the treatment of Black people compared to what you've experienced in America?
So Barbados is a black country,
Hmm.
so 95, 97% of the people who live in Barbados are black. And I really enjoy being in a black country. I enjoy not having to feel that I have to defend who I am or apologize or feel minoritized. That being said, the Brits still run Barbados, even though there's a black prime minister and a black president. They achieved independence in 1966 from Britain. And then later in 2021, all ties to Britain, because there was still some kind of an arrangement that I still don't understand. But Barbados is now a republic. So I do notice that there's colorism is very, very real here. And also, some people still, to me, have a post-slavery kind of mentality. They bow down and cater to white people. So yeah, so I do see that here. But the people are wonderful. They're beautiful people, kind, caring, industrious. You have the same issues as you have in the United States relative to who owns most of the land and the money. It's white people. Black people are relegated mostly to service, tourism kinds of housekeeping and landscaping, and those kinds of jobs.
Due to, like you said, kind of like them being like under the control of the British for so long, do you do you experience or have you found out about like unique struggles that Black people have out there compared to struggles that we might not be as prevalent in to us in America?
I think the struggles are the same. One of the big struggles here, they call it economic extraction. Just taking the resources from here and claiming them as as their own land, and those kinds of things. So I think that might be, that might be a little bit different. Here we are, Barbados, an island, a black country. It's ours, and now you've come and and you've taken it. So I think that might be, well, we have the same issue, 40 acres and a mule, right? We want that land, but in here, it's all of it's ours. All of it is ours because we inhabited this place, before you came along. So I think that might be a little bit different, but yeah, I think the same issues, that if you're melanated, if you have visually, somebody can look at you and say, oh, you're not white. They have those same issues that we have all around the globe, which we talk about in our second edition of Black Fatigue, How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. That racism is a global phenomenon, which I think we all knew, but we highlight in the second edition how it may play out somewhat differently around the globe. South Africa had a very different, history, with apartheid. The Africans were first brought to Brazil, in the 1650, 1660, time frame. And so Brazil has a very unique way. They have like 40 different ways to talk about to describe Black people based on how much melanin, you have in your skin. So depending on where you are around the world, and we interviewed a lot of people for the book, because here in Barbados, I've made a lot of friends with people, Black people who were perhaps born here, but then migrated to places like Australia or England. A lot of Black people here, because of the ties to England, went to school, went to college in England. And many of my friends that I've met are now coming back. But I've also making friends with Americans who just don't want to be in the U.S. anymore. I have a friend, for example, who just said, I'm just packing up. I packed up everything. I sold everything and I moved to Barbados. I have another friend. Well, she's not really a friend, but I met her and I said, well, how long have you been here? And she said, 3 months. I said, how long are you staying? She said, I don't know. She said, I came for a wedding and I just didn't leave.
Hmm. You know, it's funny. You just said something very interesting that I didn't know about Brazil having a bunch of ways to describe like race or, just
Mm-hmm.
complexion. I
Right.
found that interesting because there's this singer from South Africa. Her name is Tyla, and
Mm-hmm. Tyler was here. Tyler's been to Barbados several times performing.
okay, so Tyla got in a little bit of some controversy with the Americans because she identifies as colored, if I'm not mistaken, because
Right.
that's how they identify
In South,
in
well, in
South
South
Africa.
Africa.
Yeah,
She's
South
South
Africa.
Africa.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, in South Africa, that's how they
Right.
identify.
Yeah.
And I didn't know they did that in Brazil, but that was so interesting
Mhm.
because when she said that, I seen so
Right.
many Black Americans. And they're like, man, you black, how you ain't no
Right.
color, you black. So,
Exactly.
'cause
Right.
when Black Americans think of color, they think of Jim Crow. They think of
Right.
1950s, whatever. So
Mm-hmm.
I found that interesting because I don't know. I guess it's a controversial what I'm finna say, but I really do look at like gender and race very similar to me. They're very similar things. They're both man made. They're both social constructs. Like very similar things to me. And the way it is funny just the way like somebody can identify with their gender and we should accept that. I don't know. It was just interesting to see somebody be like, "Hey, you're not colored, you're black." And it's like that's like you telling her what her gender is. You know what I'm saying? Like, how can
Right.
you tell somebody to identify?
Exactly.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I found that really interesting.
Well, I mean, and therein lies some of the issue that is different, across the globe, how we identify and the terms that perhaps would be inappropriate or people would find offensive, right, to us. Our terms, yeah, but in South Africa, absolutely, someone who is colored is someone who is lighter skinned, somebody who's probably biracial. Yeah, and yeah, so they use that designation. And as you know, probably before, I don't know, before the 60s, in the United States, we call, Black people are called colored
Mhm.
people, right? Whites only, no coloreds, right? And so we rejected that term because that was a term that was uh, placed on us, right? So it does, it plays out differently. But I think the issues, broadly speaking, the issues are the same across the globe. That when it comes to wealth, white people hold all the wealth. And exceptions to that, would be places like Ghana and Nigeria, where they're really starting to really, do some great things, economically. But there's still a lot of poverty in those, in those places. And so I think that while we are the global majority, Black and Brown people are the global majority, we are also rank, the poorest of people around the world in terms
Yeah,
of if you're speaking of capitalism, if you're speaking of material wealth.
yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Black people have the worst luck in history. It seems like everywhere we go. I mean, it's like, oh, we're on this land with a bunch of gold and minerals. This is awesome. And then the white
Right,
man is like, huh, y'all got some gold and minerals?
right. Let me come take that from you, right?
I want some of
Yeah,
that too. So
yeah.
I just watched I've been promoting this documentary like I made it. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's called it's called The Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. It's about Patrice Lumumba and kind of what happened in Congo and
Mm,
how Congo was they were under the Belgium regime
hmm.
and whatnot. And it's a fantastic documentary. It was nominated for an Oscar and it's basically showing how um they were using like American jazz artists. So like Dizzy Gillespie and Louis Armstrong, they were sending them over to Congo to perform. The government thinking these jazz artists think like, oh man, I'm going back to the motherland to perform for my people. But the whole
Hmm.
time they were trying to get cozy with they were trying to the American government was basically trying to get like a false sense of security over the Patrice Lumumba, who was the premier, the president of Congo, and it was like, oh yeah, you got all these black artists here trying to make him feel cozy, but really they're just trying to like kill him so they can like, because he didn't want Belgium, America, anybody in the Congo land anymore. He was like, you take
Mhm.
like basically take your hands off the pot or whatnot.
Right.
So it's a very fascinating documentary about him, American jazz music, how it influenced the revolution over there, and kind of just how like they basically just straight up murdered him, and they were
Mhm.
just like, we because after he became president, he was like, yeah, no more Belgium, no more America. And they didn't like that at all. So very fascinating documentary if that's
Oh,
something that
yeah, I'm not familiar with it. Thank you for sharing it.
for your soundtrack to a coup d'etat. It's amazing. But yeah, like I said, it's super interesting just to look at the history of Black people, rather if it's where I live at. But I don't know anything about the history of Black people in Barbados. Like that makes me interested just hearing you talk about like tiny bits of it, the Black history of Congo, and the more you learn about Black history everywhere, I think you would agree there are a lot of differences, but a lot of it is the same struggle, like you've been
It's
saying.
the same struggle. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the same struggle. Yeah.
is that a
It's absolutely the same struggle. Being minoritized, being weaponized, demonized. Anything that is not white is not as good, and then it goes from there.
it's I guess take a little step back on how you came on my radar. As somebody who I try not to use social media that much these days. I'm kind of anti social media, low key, but I've been on social media, YouTube, and I kept seeing white people say they had black fatigue, black fatigue. I'm like, what does this mean? And then I'm like, oh, okay. This mean they tired of black people. This is what they're basically trying to say. And the way it was being so casually used, I think it's funny enough, as somebody who has been on social media for a long time, the amount of casual racism that I feel like I've seen increased since like Elon or Trump is coming to power, it's pretty crazy. And it's like, man, they're just casually saying that they tired of the black people. It's like that's a wild thing that they're
Just putting
just
it
saying.
right out there, right? Just putting it right out there.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I don't like these Negroes. That's basically what they're saying. They're just like,
Right,
God, no, that's wild. So,
right.
um, I wanted to like try to find the origin. I'm like, what extremely racist person made this term? I gotta put a face to the racist, you know? So I look it up and this book kept popping up. And I was like, all right, I don't want to see. I was like, I'll go and see what the black woman wrote later. I need to see this racist man right now. So, but you kept popping up. So I'm like, the black woman is a black woman tired of black people. I'm like, what's going on right now? So I'm confused. I'm like, I have to read this book. So I was like, before I buy the book, because I don't want to buy the book and I'm just reading a bunch of crazy stuff. Let me see what she's about first. And I'm reading up on you, and I'm like, wow, they've co-opted her term and turned it into a completely different thing. So I don't want to define what you define as black fatigue. I'll let you do it. But I just let you know that story of just finding out the term first, seeing you and being confused, then seeing like, oh, they just did what they do and just kind of took it and made it their own. So
Exactly.
what does black fatigue mean to you?
So black fatigue means to me the intergenerational, physical, mental, spiritual impact that racism has on black people's bodies. It has been well researched and well documented that racism exacerbates physical conditions like high blood pressure, like heart disease, like diabetes, and the list could go on and on. It has been documented that there's something. I'm not a medical doctor, so when I have these interviews, I don't go very far into this. However, there is something in our cellular system that gets passed down from generation to generation from us carrying the weight of racism. It gets into our DNA, according to some scientists. And that is then passed down from generation to generation. And so when we see that Black people, particularly Black men, have shorter lifespans than anyone else, part of that is because, if you're living as a Black man in anywhere in the world, you live with some element of fear all the time, some element of, somebody's going to target me because, and we're seeing racial profiling now, while it's not directly targeted to Black people, it is targeting people by the color of their skin, by their physical characteristics. And so if you're walking just minding your own business and you're afraid that you might be. So Black fatigue is that day to day emotional burden, that additional burden that we carry because of the physical space that we hold. And so somebody can look at you and know you're not white. Somebody can look at me and know that I'm not white. And that could be enough to trigger some racist kind of event, whether we know it or not. So when I wrote Black Fatigue, the publisher said, well, yeah, we're going to, publish this book for you, but who's it for? I said, well, it's mostly for white folks, because I said Black people know they have Black fatigue. We know, we live it every day, so it's for white people. And so they said, this one who I can never forget, it was a committee. She said, well, do you really think that white people would read it? And I was like, well, they oughta. But what I found out once the book was published is that it truly was more for Black people, and Black people who said to me, thank you for writing this book. Thank you because I couldn't put a name on it. Thank you because I thought maybe it was just me. And you've helped so much to help me to understand what might be going on, in my body, just by being, just simply by being. Studies show that as young as 6 months old, babies can identify who they have a preference for, and they have a preference for white skin, Black and white babies. They do some tests with infants, right? So yeah, so Black fatigue is that intergenerational malaise, if you will, that is caused by systemic, endemic, entrenched, deeply rooted racism that really is what all of our, if you really look at the root of all of the issues that we have, it's all about racism. It's all about white supremacy, white people wanting to be dominant. That's what all of this Trump stuff is about with immigration. If you notice, he's targeted Black women more so than any other group, and calls Black women dumb and low intelligence, and trying to fire Black women. The unemployment rate right now for Black women is double that of white women, and it has spiked exponentially in the last year since Trump has been, because of all the firings that have disproportionately impacted Black women. So that's Black fatigue. It's not like you just tired. It's deeper than that. Yeah.
Well, no,
It's
yeah,
not,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no. I was just gonna say it's not like you can just go to bed, go to sleep, and say, okay, I'm tired. I'm gonna wake up and I feel better in the morning.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. No, it's I remember the first time I seen something linking it to DNA. It was like this white lady. She was saying like she was super duper stressed out, and like doctors started doing like tests on her, and they found out that like her great great grandmother suffered from depression because she was in the Holocaust.
Mm,
So it kind of carried on, and
mhm,
she was like, oh, so she had that
mhm.
type of fatigue or whatever. So that is definitely a real
Yeah.
thing. I've seen you say before, like you initially wrote this for white people to kind of, I guess, like teach them and help them understand. So
Right.
like I have a question for you. I have a question for you. I need advice from you regarding that. So I'm somebody who am very close to finishing uh my master's degree to be a counselor. So I know I'm supposed to be teaching and helping people, but I can't lie.
Mhm.
I don't I'm in between. I go in between. Man, who's gonna help this white person understand that what they're saying is wrong? Like, I probably should help them. I have the knowledge. I think I have the knowledge to express to them and help them, and even answer certain questions on, hey, maybe this is why you shouldn't say the N word. Maybe I could be the one to do that. But then I
Right.
also think I'm not your teacher, buddy. I don't know if this is my job. I don't feel like doing that. Go Google it or find it somewhere else. So you, somebody who decided to write a book initially to try to help them out, is that something that I, as a black person, should be trying to help black people, or I mean, not black people, white people out with these things, or I don't know. I just don't know where I stand with that.
Yeah. So I, obviously those watching this can see we're of different generations. And I think that the younger generations have that worldview and that dilemma, if you will, or that thought that, hey, I'm not your teacher. I think that my generation didn't even think about it. Somebody got to do it. That was kind of, who's going to do it? Are we going to let them continue to be ignorant? And I think, looking at all the book bans now, because before Trump's second, he tried to do that in his first term too. But
Hmm.
one of the things my consulting firm, we would do in training sessions is we would have resources, read this, to help understand the history, of racism and how this is so entrenched in our world. Well, now they're trying to take that away. You can't read it. I mean, I'm being extreme. I recognize that, but still making it more difficult, right?
Yeah.
They're making it more difficult to just say, oh, just go read this book. And it's not that simple, but I mean, that's a starting place. That's something that people can do. If you want to send people and say, I'm not going to be your teacher, but here's a list of resources, right? So that list of resources now is more difficult. And so for those people who are maybe on the fence and said, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this, but it was too hard. I couldn't find a book so I just feel like, if not you, who? And I put the caveat on that, not to feel guilty if you say it's not me. So I think that hopefully there are enough who will say, yeah, I still want to be in the game of helping white people recognize how racism, impacts the whole world, impacts them as well. And so there are scholars that speak to the fact that, okay, the stress that we feel, right, but the guilt and the shame and the not wanting to talk about it, that impacts their psyche and their physical being as well.
Yeah.
So we're all sick because of racism. It obviously impacts differently. But you've heard that white guilt, right? White people feeling guilty,
Hmm.
but they can choose not to engage with it. They can choose not to talk about it. They can go on with their lives and live in their, secluded communities where they hardly ever see a black person.
Yeah.
We don't have that choice.
And it's interesting because I feel like I said, I don't want to make it seem like I'm just refuting it or refusing to do it because, like I said, I feel like it's natural in me to want to help people. And I think if it's a friend or if it's somebody I feel like it's in really good faith, maybe I don't mind talking about it. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not gonna lie. That's kind of my black fatigue sometimes. I'm like, I don't, I don't know if I got the energy to,
Right.
to sit here and teach you everything you need. But on the other
And
hand, I'm like,
you know what I say to that?
mhm,
Don't feel guilty about it,
mm,
because well-being and taking care of our spirits, taking care of our be just being taking making being able to feel like you're whole and healthy, um and not having extra burden, that's really key.
mm,
So if that's not your job, if that's not your role, then say, hey, that's not for me, but I got a buddy over here who loves to do that, right? Or something,
yeah, I'm gonna direct them to you next time.
right.
I'm gonna say, you know what? There's a great author that you can go read. And that'd be good. I'm gonna, that's what, I'm gonna buy like 20 copies of the next book. Just hand them out to
Okay.
white people when they what I'm saying when they
Yeah.
get like
and
what?
that and that's still doing, I mean,
Yeah,
what is the work, the
yeah,
work that, and I think that we all have a responsibility, white people, black people, all people have a responsibility to try to create a world that is equitable and fair.
mm,
Because that's what we say. And let's just go United States. True. In the United States, that's what we say. What does the Constitution guarantee? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Well, we
mm,
don't have that, right? They talk about equal rights and all of that. We don't have that. So everybody should be concerned about it, not just black people. Everybody should be concerned about it, because what Martin Luther King said this, or something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing, it's not the exact quote, But what you do to the least of us, you and I think somebody like that in the Bible too. What you do to the least of us, you do to all of us.
Mm,
You know, and so there's lots of Heather McGee's book, The Sum of Us, speaks to how policies that were designed specifically to hurt Black people actually end up hurting all people. She gives one example in the book. She has many examples in her book, The Sum of Us, but the one example that she gave was swimming pools. And she talked about how I think it was the 50s and the 60s, there were public swimming pools, there were neighborhood pools. And then integration started. And so Black people started moving into these neighborhoods. And so the white people didn't want the Black kids swimming in the pools. So they literally covered up the pools. They literally shut down the swimming pools. And who gets hurt by that? The little white kids that want to go swimming can't go swimming either because
yeah.
there's no more pools. And what they did is they moved the pools to, quote, country clubs where you had to have a membership, right? And who can't afford to be a member? Well, Black people certainly couldn't afford. Well, and in some cases they were not even allowed to be members. But a whole bunch of white folks who can't afford to be country club members either. So who are you hurting? You're hurting, and that's just one example about how racism literally hurts everybody. Everybody pays the cost of of racism.
No, for sure. I seen something similar to that where I had to watch this documentary. It's like from like the early 2000s. It's about like rich, like young adults essentially, and they're just like following the lives of rich young adults. And one of the like white young rich people, they like super rich family. They had like a little subscription to the country club, and it was a tennis court there, and they wanted to bring one of their Black friends there. It was
Mm-hmm.
a tennis course or a golf course. I forget which one, but either way, they go there, and when the Black friend pulls up, everybody's like, who is like they're looking like all the white people looking like. So then after they leave, they pull the person aside like, who is this person? Did they have any like he was like, and the person was like, every time I bring my white friends, I get no questions. It was like they got so many questions, and it was like they didn't want that person to come back. So it's like you're affecting the Black person by that, but then you also affect the white person because like they can't even bring their friends around. So
Right.
yeah,
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
definitely does
Yeah.
affect everybody. It's interesting because just listening to you speak, you're a great teacher. I feel like it's very
Well, thank
evident
you.
that it's very evident, of course, it's very evident that you speak to people in large groups of people. And I know it'd be people in the crowd like, dang, I didn't never think about it that way, because I feel like you put it in ways that are very simple and very simplified, very complex situations and complex topics, but simplified that a person that's never been exposed to the topic can understand it. And I know a lot of that comes
That's
from.
the goal. So thank you. I
Yes,
appreciate
yes, I could tell you
that.
do it very great, and I could tell that you have been doing this for a long time, and I know you've well, not like that.
That's all right. It's been a long time.
Long time. I just mean 2 years, not that long. You know what I'm saying?
It's all relative, right? It's all relative.
All relative, all relative. But no, I know you've been doing a lot of DEI stuff. So like you've been
Right.
speaking to like companies and things like that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know, um, since you started from now, have you noticed any effects or changes with the Trump administration? Because I know they've really been targeting DEI. Have you noticed, I know you have noticed. What have you noticed? Let me put it like that. What have you noticed?
So just let me start with my own company, the Winters Group. We've been in business now for 41 years. I started when I was really pretty young when I started the company because I had been in corporate America and wasn't having a good experience. The racism and the sexism that I experienced in corporate America, some of the stuff that I didn't really understand at the time, I didn't name, but I couldn't. I just knew it didn't feel good. I said, I'm out of here. And I just decided that if I was going to succeed or not succeed in life, it wasn't going to be because of some white man told me I was too this or wasn't enough of that, or I need to get rid of my afro, or whatever it might be. I was just too much of an independent spirit to say I'm not letting these folks dictate who I am or what I am. So I actually started the company, as a market research company, doing qualitative and quantitative research because that's my background. And then organizations started to ask me to do surveys around employee satisfaction. That's what they called them back then. And then they started asking me to break that data down by race and gender and, those various demographics. And so we started to do that. So I kind of fell into the diversity work, right? I really
Mhm.
didn't start being in diversity. So I say all of that to say I went through the era where representation was the key issue. We don't have any. We can't find any. There's not enough of these. And so then you would find programs that were going to promote people to get it. We're going to advocate for people to get into, or give them programs that they paid for to build a certain skill. So one of the examples of that would be car dealerships. And so in the 70s and 80s, General Motors and Chevrolet bankrolled, some black people. Most of them were like, people who already had a little bit of money, but got them into car dealerships because there weren't any black car dealerships. And so that's just an example of a program. And there were many, many programs that were set up because black people had been kept out of certain fields, and now you have affirmative action, right? That says you have to, right? So I've been in it since the days of affirmative action, where you had to take positive steps to integrate, your workforce. So then it moved from being just about representation. Let's get the numbers. It moved into so that's the diversity part. It moved into, well, now that we got the people here, what kind of experience are they having in the workplace? Are they being treated well? Do they feel like they belong? Do they feel minoritized? And so that's the inclusion part, right? So how well are we including people? Microaggressions that happen in the workplace. I had sexual harassment that happened to me in the workplace, as well as racism, like your hair's too. I had that one time I was sporting a very short natural, and one of my colleagues came into my office and said, "Will your hair grow?" I looked at him and I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you ought to let it," and he walked out. He wasn't even my boss; he was just a colleague. So I mean, so that's the inclusion part. I'm here, right? But I don't feel welcomed. I don't feel like I belong, right? So that's diversity and inclusion. And then we went to the DEI, so the equity part got put in there. And so, what does equity actually look like? So equity and equality are two different things. So equality means you just treat everybody the same.
Mhm.
Equity means that you give people what they need in order to succeed. So if I'm starting from here and you starting from here, well, you got to give me a boost in order to get me, so that we level. So equity is really about leveling the playing field, and that's what they don't want to do anymore. So they don't want to do any of it. So yes, I've seen a huge difference, because what Trump is purporting is that DEI has discriminated against white men. I want to say heterosexual white men, all right, because he doesn't like the LGBTQ folks either. And there's no proof to that. As a matter of fact, if you look at the statistics, which he is suppressing and squelching, you can't get the statistics anymore. White men still hold the majority of leadership roles, even though white men are only 33% of the population. They hold 80 to 90% of the power positions. And so there's no relevant, that's not the word, there's no credible, that's the word I'm looking for. There's no credible information to suggest that Black people, brown people, women, LGBTQ community have taken anybody's job. The other thing that he is pushing is the merit and the competency, that if you're Black, that you got there because of affirmative action and the standards were lowered, and therefore you shouldn't be there. Now we already know that everybody that he picked for his cabinet has no qualifications in whatever job that they have been given. They had no background in that job. So how are you going to speak to merit? And we also know from data, from statistics, that Black people, and Black people more so than women, but Black people have to be twice as good to get half as far. So you will note that most times Black people have more qualifications overly more qualifications than any white person in a particular role. Case in point, Supreme Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, Jackson Brown. I always get the back, but the Black woman Supreme Court
Yeah.
Justice Ketanji. There was a chart that shows the qualifications of every other Supreme Court justice, and her boxes are filled. Every box is filled. Everybody else's boxes. I don't know if you've seen that chart. Everybody
I
else's
have.
box is sparsely filled, right?
Mhm.
So she's more qualified than anybody else on the Supreme Court. Yet and still, they tried to demean her and her qualifications. So, so yes, I had a staff of 20 people in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered, and we could not keep up with the business. Everybody wanted to do anti-racism work. Everybody wanted to do anti-racism work. Couldn't keep up with the business. Many corporations put out statements and declared. First they said, well, we didn't know racism was still such a big issue. These big CEOs said that. So in the first edition of Black Fatigue, I wrote a chapter that said Sublime Ignorance. I've changed that chapter title in the second edition to From Sublime Ignorance to Deliberate Erasure.
Mm.
Because now that you know, you can't say you don't know anymore. But now you're trying to erase, banning books, rolling back on diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives in the organization, scrubbing your website so that there's no words that say diversity on your website. We had 20 employees. As of January 1st, we will have 3. So you asked how it has impacted me. I wanted to give you that history, how we went from it's all about representation to it's all about how to include to this leveling the playing field. That's all being dismantled. And because it's being dismantled, companies like mine are hanging on by a thread.
Mm. I mean, there's a bunch I want to comment on. The first thing that comes in my brain is you talking about the Black Supreme judge, Supreme Justice judge, and how she had everything checked off or whatnot. And I feel like Black people, when we see somebody in a crazy high position, we know like, man, they must have did everything. Like
Right.
it's kind of funny. It makes me think about this video I seen. It was this pilot. He was walking to the airplane. He was Black. He was young. He had dreads. I think he might have goals in his mouth. And I seen a white person like I would never let this guy fly me. Like this guy's probably terrible. But I'm like, man, if they hired a Black young person with dreads and goals, he might be the best pilot in America if they're letting him fly this plane. I think it was like a very good it wasn't even like Spirit or anything. It was like a really good airline. It was like, yeah, it was like he must be the man. So it's funny that we see that, and that's
Right.
one of those things. Just growing up Black, you understand things that you don't even realize that you have to explain to other people until they say
Because if that person got there, that must mean, whoa, they super bad, right? As we used to say,
he
they
is
super
the
bad.
man, you know.
Right.
So there's that.
But in white people's mind, when they see a Black person like that, in their mind, it's, oh, I'm not gonna get on this plane because they probably are affirmative action hire and just got, it's interesting because there are qualifications for particular types of jobs. If you want to be an accountant, if you want to be an airline pilot, if you want to be a lawyer, whatever, you got to pass the test. Well, no matter what
Mhm,
color you are, you got to pass the test.
mhm.
you know.
See, and this is why some of my Black fatigue come in, because it's like why don't y'all know this? It's like, why I gotta tell you? That's what I was talking about, where I'm just like, why do I have to tell y'all this? Because this feel like common sense to me. But as somebody once said, whoever said this, common sense ain't so common sometimes.
Right,
So
exactly.
so
Right,
so, so
exactly.
there's that.
But
Uh,
that's the entrenched racism that I'm talking about, because racism doesn't make common sense.
mm,
See, doesn't make common sense. It's not about common sense.
that I mean, you're right. Anybody that's like a racist is definitely not somebody who excels in common sense. So you are
Right,
completely
right,
right with that.
right.
Another thing you brought up was just kind of uh, uh, what do you call these things? They're things that happen in the workplace. They're small.
Microaggressions.
Boom, there you go, microaggressions. Um, it made me think about a story where I had a class. It was a multicultural, like counseling class, basically show you how to be accepting and
Mhm.
diverse when you're being a counselor. So my teacher, black woman, she told the story, and I found it slightly humorous because I'm black, but it was just so interesting to see everybody else, white people, like they were mortified. She basically the story went, she's working at a college and I don't know if she bought food for all the teachers, something, but she went into this other teacher class while he was teaching to bring him, I let's say it was food. And the teacher says, white teacher, he says, "Oh my gosh, you came in perfect timing. I'm teaching my class something that you could really help with." And she was like, "Oh, like what's up?" And he was like, "I'm teaching my class about ebonics. Can you please speak ebonics for me?" And she was like, "I'm okay." And then he was like, "Come on, I know you're a little nervous. Like, come on, let's speak some ebonics." And she was just like, "What is going on?" And she left. And I'm kind of on the other, like we're all like on a Zoom call, like during this class. I'm kind of laughing, but I'm looking at like all the white people. They're like, like oh my, like how could this? Like I'm like they want to give her a hug. Like I can't believe this happened to you. And I think my reaction is because growing up as a black person, these type of things happen to the point where I feel like the opposite of black fatigue, you're just it's like desensitized to it, where it's just you laugh at certain things. Like you
Mhm.
like we've all heard things that are like microaggressions or like racism where it's so outrageous we laugh at it. It's like he did what? Like the white man said what? Like it's just funny to us. But when a white person hears it, it's just so interesting. And I don't know, I just found that interesting that on the
Well,
opposite end of black fatigue, we're desensitized to certain stuff.
yeah, I think that might be part of the white guilt too, in terms of when when oh, I can't believe that. Oh, I'm so sorry for you. Oh, and but we've learned coping mechanisms,
Hmm.
and part of that coping mechanism is to be able to laugh and just say, just another ignorant white person, you know, God bless them, maybe not even because it has happened, but that coping mechanism is important for us to be able to thrive and to protect our mind, body, and spirit,
Hmm.
right? Our ability to know that these things have happened to us, will continue to happen to us. I can't take it personally. I can't let it get into my psyche. I can't let it, because if I do, then that is going to impact my health. That's a stressor.
Mm.
It's another stressor. And with everything else that we have going on in life, life can be stressful for anybody, no matter who you are, what age you are, what color you are. What's the saying now? Life be lifing,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, so life be lifing. And when you're black, you got that extra. That's what black fatigue is all about. You got life be lifing, and then on top of that, you've got all of the things that black people have to endure because of situations like you just described. That's just one example, of the assumption that, the assumption that she even knew what ebonics was. All black people don't know what ebonics is necessarily, right? And that, that she would be comfortable, it's a lot. But our ability to laugh and our ability to, yeah, I think that's really, really important. That's part of what we need to be able to do more of for our well-being, because it's to not take it in and not take it personally. It's not about me. This is about this other person, or this is about the system, or the structure. But it's very detrimental, particularly when I was looking at something on, like you. I don't do too much social media, but I saw something this morning, about a woman who, I think she'd been let go from her job, and she was just talking about all of the degrees that she had,
Mm.
all of the white people that she had helped to get to their position, and she never got to that position, and then she got laid off.
Mm.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's, I mean, that hurts. I mean, that really, you've done all this work, you've studied all these hours, and got all of these degrees, only to be passed by somebody else who obviously not as qualified.
So you tell me something like that. You were talking about how your business has been affected by the DI cuts.
Mhm.
Just everything else we talked about. Reading the book, which I haven't said by the way. Great, phenomenal book. great book.
Oh, you did read? I thought you said you didn't read it
No,
yet.
no, no.
You did.
At first, I didn't read it because when I seen a
Okay.
black woman wrote something about black fatigue and I didn't know what it meant, I'm like, why
Right.
is a black person creating such a harmful term? I was like, what's wrong with this woman? That's what I was thinking at
Because
first.
you had the co-opted
Yes,
definition.
I had the co-op definition at first, and then when I found out, I was like, okay, I can buy the book and read it. I was like, I was scared that the book was just gonna be, oh, black people this, black people that. That's what I thought it was gonna be, because that's what I thought it meant. So, no, I did.
No,
I,
no, no.
I,
I did do one video on social media to correct it, but
mhm,
I wasn't gonna get into all of that because I stand firm. This is what it means. If somebody else wants to mean something else, that's on you, but that's not what black fatigue means. And I
yes,
coined the term, and yeah, so white folks are going to do what they want to do, and they've co-opted woke, right? So woke has become some nefarious thing. To be woke is something, right? And I'm like, what's the opposite of being woke? You be asleep, you want to be asleep? Because if I'm not woke, I'm asleep, right?
mhm. I've been saying this. I've been saying that since I found out what black fatigue meant. I was like, black fatigue and woke are the same thing because they like not same. They don't mean the same thing, but they've
Right,
been stolen. That they've been
right.
co-opted or whatever. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
same exact thing happened.
Same exact thing, right? Yeah. We're going to get rid of all this woke stuff, right? So
Now,
and it's obvious that that's exactly what they're doing because they do want to put people asleep by banning the books, right? You can't
mhm,
read this, and you can't train, you can't have a diversity training, and all of that kind of stuff. That is about let's just put everybody to sleep so they don't know anything about it.
exactly. And like I said, the book is phenomenal. The stuff that we're talking about adds to the point or adds to the question I'm going to ask. But the book talks about so much. I don't know. There's so much stuff in there where it's almost like the topics are like hopeless because it's just like just teaching. Because like I said, you're trying to teach white people like, well, this is why black people feel like this, and just reading it, just listen to what we're talking about. How do you not become such a pessimistic person? You seem so optimistic. You're still willing to teach because I'm not gonna lie. The older I get, the more pessimistic I get about black people, the black community. Rather if it's racism, rather if it's how we treat each other sometimes, like just a lot of stuff. I become pessimistic about when it involves black people. I don't know if you've ever gotten to that point or what, but you don't seem pessimistic at all. How did you get to this place of optimism still?
Well, I have to stay. I have to stay positive. I mean, there's no other choice but to stay positive because I have to protect my peace. I have to
Mm,
protect my mind, body, and spirit, right? And so, um, I look at what I'm grateful for. I don't engage with the media. Media sells negativity, or I think I just said that backwards, but yeah, media wants
mm,
negativity because that's what sells. That's what sells. So a lot of the stuff we look at may be overblown. I know racism is definitely not overblown, but I try to look at what things are happening that are good, that advance. So with the second edition of Black Fatigue, we're going to have a workbook that's called Healing Black Fatigue.
mm.
Practices for more like things like meditation and resources for people. But how do you identify it? And those kinds of things. So that's going to be what will be a companion to the book. But I think that the powers that be, want to keep us in a state of, in a depressed state, if you will. And maybe depressed is too strong of a word, but almost in a paralyzed state, right? Where we just say, whatever, because there's nothing I can do about it. The man is this and the man's, and nothing I can do about it. And that's what I think I try to avoid going to that kind of a mentality. Sometimes I do, but then I think about this saying, brighten the corner where you are. So what is it that you can do? So for example, here in Barbados, I went swimming with my friend yesterday, and she was telling me about some of the needs that the people here in Barbados have. And she was her church is doing like a collection for Christmas and whatnot. And so I said, well, I can buy ham for a family. I can buy ham, and it's not a lot, You know what I'm saying? But in my sphere of influence and something that I could do, and it's not because I want to do because it makes me feel good, uh, but it's just that okay, there are things that we can that we can each do. If I can teach somebody something, if I wasn't going to come on your podcast, by the way, I wasn't going to do it because I just I I sometimes just need to protect my peace. I don't know. I don't feel like talking about who is he, what do you want to talk about? so, um, so then I looked you up, and I said, yeah, well, maybe and I saw a couple of the interviews that you had done. I said, okay, well, maybe I will do this one. So I think that yeah, just being able to whether it's that you have just had a new member of your family, somebody had a baby and there's new life that you can celebrate, or that you could help somebody, I just think those are the little things that we have to hold on to. I also think, though, as Black people, we just need to do a better job of collaborating and building coalitions, because there's a whole lot of individual efforts going on, and they're individual efforts, and everybody wants their individual effort to be highlighted. But
Mhm.
we brought some of those efforts together. There would be so much more. They'd be so much more powerful. And we've not been able to do that over the centuries, and it's because the man doesn't want us to do that. Doesn't Because the powers that be know that there's power in us coming together. And so we kind of stay with our own. This group's doing this group's doing this group's doing this. You got Race Forward, you got Black Lives Matter, you got the African American Policy Forum. You've got, there's you got the NAACP, you got the Urban League, you got, and the list goes on and on and on. But I don't think we collaborate well enough.
I agree. I wasn't around in the early 70s, but I look at a lot of things from the early 70s, and it seemed like a lot of togetherness and unity
Much more
of Black
so,
people,
yes. I think so.
specifically during that era. But
Yeah.
once again, my conspiracy theory, I think the government
Hmm.
seen that was like, oh man, we need to
Hmm.
break this up. Let's drop a little crack in the hood. And I feel like it went downhill after that. But the early 70s, I feel like everybody seemingly wanted to learn more about Africa. A lot of embracing my natural hair,
Hmm.
embracing my black, beautiful skin. Just a
Hmm.
lot of that seemingly happened in the early 70s. And yeah,
Well, but I think I'm seeing a resurgence of that. So I
mhm,
said that we're not collaborating as well as we might, but I'm also seeing more efforts at that, particularly from a Pan African perspective and across the African diaspora. So
mhm,
here in Barbados, I've been to some conferences that are promoting ties between the Caribbean and Africa.
mm,
And that's going. I think that's coming along. So let me just give you one example. There used to be all sorts of restrictions within African countries. So if I'm from Ghana and I wanted to go to Kenya, I need to get a visa. So they're trying to reduce those barriers from moving from country to country, so as to bring the resources and the needs together. So I'm seeing more of that. I participated in something called the Guba Awards here in Barbados, and it's a Pan African movement. The woman who started is from Ghana. She's from Ghana, and she held it in Barbados this year and gave awards to a number of people in a number of different fields, including some people from the U.S., like John Hope Bryan, who runs Operation Hope, got an award. Ben Crump got an award. But there were also many African people who got awards and Caribbean people who got an award. So it was like bringing people together from different aspects of the African diaspora to begin to work together. And the king of the Asante people from Ghana actually came, and I happened to was able to go to his talk, and he talked very much about kind of the bottom line. He didn't say it this way. He said it more eloquently than I'm going to say it. But the bottom line is we don't need the white folks. We've got everything that we need across the African diaspora to thrive. And so I am seeing, more of the coming together.
mm. Well, no, that's as a black person, and I'm pretty sure you, as a black person, want to see more of that, and hopefully in the future we will. I Excuse me.
Mhm.
I appreciate you coming through. If I know the second edition of the book is coming next year, so
It's
I
coming in
will.
June, but it's ready for pre-order right now. So for
Okay.
your listeners, so Black Fatigue: How Racism Erodes the Mind, Body, and Spirit. It's co-authored by my daughter, who is now president of the company, Marisha Winters Reese. So she co-authored this second edition. We have four new chapters, four completely new, because so much has happened since 2020. And so the book will be out in June, but it is ready on Amazon for pre-order.
All right. For everybody watching, I appreciate you guys. Please buy the first edition, read that before you get the second edition, and go from there. Until next time, I appreciate you guys. I say what I mean what I say. Haters are gonna hate, players are gonna play, and you guys holler at your boy.